The Golden Stallion is here for something that I like to do at least once a month. I don't think I've ever had an occasion where I've done it more than that, but I like to do it at least once a month, and that is the Star Wars update. I do one for patrons only, again, every month. I also do one for Star Trek, and if I ever find something else that tickles my fancy to that level, which is a pretty hard sell that something could ever, speak to me, or, that I could appreciate as much as I appreciate Star Wars or Star Trek. But, hey, you never know, so I'm just putting that out there. I mean, there's Babylon 5, but, we're not going to get... We were supposed to get a movie in 2016. That didn't happen. Oh, well. But whatever. Anyway, we're probably never going to get any... Or not... I shouldn't say never. In fact, I want to talk about this at some point, but I'm not going to talk about it now. But I really feel like the TV landscape has changed significantly. And if you want me to give you a hint, it actually has to do with Fuller House, but I'm going to save that maybe for a climax in a Sovereign Tech Prime episode, because I think that's a huge thing to talk about. So, because I never want to say, we'll never see any more Babylon 5. Things have changed. So anyway, not with Babylon 5, I'm saying with TV in general. All right. Let's get into the Star Wars update. I'm actually going to be cutting. There was a lot of subjects, a lot of content that I wanted, a lot of media that has been released by Lucasfilm that I wanted to talk about. But there's so much that particularly came out or finished up in September that it doesn't make sense to talk about all of it. I'd be here for 2 hours. Not that I think anybody would mind. In fact, longer episodes seem to be. Someone recently actually told me that. I don't think it was Spreaker or maybe it was Libsyn. One of the podcast companies, as it were, released statistics as far as like what averages are, and the average most listened to podcasts are 2 hours long. I would have thought it would be the exact opposite, that people would mainly listen to podcasts that are like 15 minutes or 20 minutes or something like that. But I'll tell you, I think that This Week in Tech and every show, most of the main shows on This Week in Tech, probably heavily skew that number, because Security Now is 2 hours, This Week in Tech is 2 hours plus. I mean, anyway, so, and of course Sovereign Tech is 2 hours, but this is not going to be. So let's stop talking about that. But I'm just saying that for the October Star Wars update, which will be coming in a few weeks, that one, stuff that I had to push off from this Star Wars update, I will just cover in that. Because in September, we got a very rare event, which we had, well, it's not a rare, I mean, it's once a year, but we had a rarer event in what was released. So the rare event was Force Friday, which was that the 4th? Whenever it was in September. But on that day, or maybe it was the 9th, on that day, we got 2 full Star Wars novels. So, hey, I'm not complaining about that. But admittedly, that took me a little while to, consume. Usually it's one book and I can knock it out maybe in a day or a couple days, because the average, I listen to Star Wars books. I listen to them. I don't read them generally. I get, digital copies as well as the Audible copies, but mainly because in case I need to look up the spelling of a word or something like that, because Star Wars has a lot of funny terms and funny names. I still get digital copies of them, but how I consume Star Wars media, because there is sort of so much, is I listen to it, because I can listen to a full novel completely unabridged inside of like 5 hours. Okay. So I can do that in a day, or, if it's a really good day, a real, day where I'm just like kind of doing more mindless stuff. Or I could do it in a couple, 2-3 days, something like that. So September's been somewhat of a busy month for me. We went to a festival, a few other things, but so I finally got around to listening to both of those novels that came out. Also, there's a lot of comic books that had come out, and there's some other things I think really to discuss in general. So I want to, and some series actually finished up, so I want to get into these. And there's other things that I had not reviewed yet as well, like that includes Forces of Destiny, which are these like 2.5 minute or so shorts that were released on the Star Wars channel on YouTube. But anyway, we'll get into that. But let's start it off with really what I think was the hottest thing to come out this month with Star Wars. Well, actually, first off, let's talk a little bit about the state of Star Wars, shall we? Of course, we had, Colin Trevorrow ended up getting dumped from episode 9. And now we have J.J. Abrams, who is going to be writing, well, not writing exactly, but I'm sure he'll have a heavy hand in that, but who will be directing episode 9. I feel like Star Wars is in a very precarious place right now, and we're going to cover that more as we talk about some of the media, the books and the comics that have come out in September and a little before, as well as a little bit about Forces of Destiny. I think that there is an overarching style, there is an overarching marketing plan that is readily seeable, I think, but. Yeah, I feel like Star Wars is in some pretty rough shape. I don't, as far as the episode 9 news with Colin Trevorrow, being replaced by J.J. Abrams, I get it. Maybe Trevorrow wasn't playing ball. Maybe they were concerned about his numbers, blah, blah, blah. All right, I understand all that. I would not have gone with J.J. Abrams. I really would have gone with Rian Johnson. I understand that they tried and he said, look, supposedly they tried and he said, hey, like, this is just too daunting. Or not daunting, not like he couldn't do it, but it's just so tasking that he didn't want to do it. And there was like, no, I mean, it's hard to believe that there was an amount of money that he would say no to, but that they could offer, but whatever. So J.J. Abrams, fine. I wouldn't have minded. A lot of people were talking about when this, whole director shakeup happened, just coming off of the heels of Ron Howard taking over, the Han Solo movie, the Han Solo movie, side project, whatever, from the previous directors of that. And that's why I say things are very precarious. Like, it was a smart move, a smart PR move to say, okay, we're bringing in J.J. Abrams because The Force Awakens is by many metrics the most successful movie of all time. So, how are you going to argue with that? But I liked, some people reached back to some very old interviews from like the 80s with George Lucas, where George Lucas simply said, I want to be the guy directing the last Star Wars movie. And I think that would have been awfully damned big of Disney / Lucasfilm. And I think it would have been poetic if they allowed him to direct episode 9. He didn't have to write it, but to let him direct it. Oh yeah. And he didn't have to be in the editing room, but to let him be the director, fine. Fuck, even if it's a name only and you bring on, have JJ be like, second director. I forget what the position's called, where you're right underneath and you're kind of doing the, for lack of a better phrase, I don't like this phrase, but you're doing the bitch work, right? Bring in somebody else that, another big name underneath them that could do a lot of that. I really think that would have been huge. And that, though maybe that would have created a whole lot more controversy. I don't know, because for some reason, I'm definitely a part of the prequel defense force, but there's a lot of people that really hate the prequels that much to where, they never, ever want, George Lucas to be touching Star Wars again. I think that's criminal, but okay. Whatever. That's how you feel about it. So Star Wars is really right now, it's really riding high on the fact that it's had successful films. I still think, and we'll talk about Rogue One more throughout this. I still think that Rogue One was meant to be a very different film. It just is. Just deal with it. Like, I'm never going to let that go. That movie was meant to be something completely different than it was. And there's plenty of scenes, and they're not just scenes made for trailers. There's plenty of dialogue. There's stuff that exists within the novel by Alexander Freed and all that, where there was another movie that was, Ben Mendelsohn even said that there was like 4 different cuts. 4 major different ways that each scene was recorded, 4 and completely different scenes. So we have the hints that there was a much better film out there. Not to say Rogue One is bad, okay? In fact, it's part of a larger picture that we'll be talking about, but because it's not bad, it was an excellent movie, okay? But I think there could have been something way, way better. I think there was meant to be a film in the first half that's completely different from the film that's actually in the first half. Second half, largely, I think, came together the way it was meant to, and it's beautiful in what it is. So Anyway, yeah, I mean, just crazy stuff. I guess we'll talk more about the state of Star Wars, as we get into all this. I don't know that there's any other like minute news that has any real bearing that's worth talking about, but definitely the Trevorrow shakeup was kind of crazy. I mean, a part of me does wonder, like, what the hell? Like, why do these directors want to walk away from Lucasfilm? Like, what is Lucasfilm asking to be done in these movies? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just a loss of creative control that they have when they walk in. I mean, and certainly J.J. Abrams has plenty of gravitas to wear and panache and cash, whatever. Where cachet, social cachet. How about that? Where I like saying cachette. Where he can really call shots, and certainly if he walks away, I mean, Lucasfilm would be in really, really dire straits. It's kind of a crazy thing, but there might be a reason why they're so hard-nosed about a lot of this stuff, and maybe we'll talk about that as we get into reviewing the media that was released in September, and some of which also came to conclusion in September. But let's start right off with the good stuff. I mean, like, this is. In fact, I gave a ranking in the Sovereign Tech Uncensored Facebook group. I gave a ranking after I read this book. The book is Leia, Princess of Alderaan by Claudia Gray. And keep in mind, this and the book Phasma, which is about Captain Phasma, obviously, both came out the same day. Okay, so it's like Christmas in September. But anyway, Leia, Princess of Alderaan by Claudia Gray. This book, I did a ranking, like I said, and I mean, I'll just put this right out up front. My number one book is still Thrawn. I thought Thrawn was a brilliant piece of not just of writing, but of performance. And what I mean by that is the performance of the production of the audiobook, the voice acting, or the narrator, all that was just tremendous. It was through the roof. How rock solid and how engrossing that really was. It was really something. So anyway, number one would be Thrawn. Number two, I think I put Dark Disciple still, which I love. Christy Golden's work in Star Wars has been fantastic. She also did Inferno Squadron. She did the Battlefront 2 prequel book that also had tremendous production value in the audiobook. Because it actually had Janina Gavankar reprising her role, as the main character in Battlefront 2, and doing the entire audiobook herself, which I thought was Iden Verso, right? It's kind of, I talked about that in the last Star Wars update, where it's weird. It sounds like the reverse of Jyn Erso, Iden Verso, like where she's like the Imperial version of Jyn Erso. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I thought that was really cool. But anyway, her book, her first book that she did for Star Wars, and for the new canon, was actually based off of a Clone Wars script, which explains probably why it was so good, because it's some of Dave Filoni's work, at the end of the day. So Dark Disciple, I give that a really, really, really top marks. It also introduced one of my new favorite characters in, I don't want to say the expanded universe, but someone who hasn't been on film or animation yet, film or TV yet, but has just been in the books. That being, what's her name? Lassa Rame, right? Captain of the Bloodbone Order, her ship's called the Opportunity. But she is a Pantoran female, just the whole character, the presentation, everything. She is so sexy. She is not in Leia, Princess of Alderaan, but interestingly, she's in both the Christy Golden's works. Now there's a point I have to make with that. But anyway, going on, number 3, I put Lost Stars on this list. So we had Tarkin, Dark Disciple, then Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, then Leia, Princess of Alderaan, also by Claudia Gray, and then number 5, I put Tarkin. And we'll get into number 4, obviously, because that's what I'm reviewing here. But Tarkin, putting that in number 5, really has to do with, like, Tarkin's backstory is very interesting. The Carrion Spike, which is kind of the lead ship in that, which belongs to Tarkin, has a greater role to play later on in Star Wars, even after Return of the Jedi, when you read the Poe Dameron comics. But I enjoy, the main thing for me with Tarkin was in that book, you find out, and we talked about this in previous Star Wars updates, you find out why the Emperor, what his plan is, like why he does what he does, what he's trying to do, what he's trying to accomplish, etc. Same with Thrawn also does that. And as I've said many times, the secret ingredient for truly great Star Wars content, Star Wars media, whatever it is, book, comic, movie, you name it, is the Emperor. The Emperor is the secret sauce. When he comes on the scene or there's talk of him or something, I mean, everybody's breath is just held, and I think it's true. And if they ever, I know there's been hints of this back in the Rick McCallum days with Lucas and so on, and even to today, if they ever do like a young Palpatine series, I am so on, and I guarantee you that's going to be one of the greatest shows in television history if they ever decide to really do that. I mean, some of the scripts that they talked about that were made by McCallum and Lucas, well, I mean, I don't think Rick McCallum himself actually wrote them, just he was kind of the yes man at the time. It may not have been the strongest stuff in the world, but really, I think it would have ended up being huge, just because you would have known that it's the Emperor, and if it still ends up coming into fruition, it is still going to be huge. I mean, even on Clone Wars, when you'd watch Clone Wars, when Sidious would show up, like in season 5 or something, I mean, shit got real. I mean, he changes the game every time he shows up. So that's why Tarkin sits at number 5. I mean, really, any of the books, except for maybe Tarkin, any of the books in the top 5 could just as easily be number 1. If I didn't like Thrawn as much as I like Thrawn, the character itself, maybe Thrawn wouldn't have been a number 1. Maybe Dark Disciple, or maybe maybe Leia, Princess of Alderaan, would have taken that seat. It very easily could have. Let's talk about that, because this is definitely one of the greatest Star Wars books ever written, just bar none, whether you're talking about the old EU or, the new canon. And Claudia Gray right now, the author, she is the hottest thing going in Star Wars media outside of the movies. I mean, she's just delivering, story after story, putting it all together. And this is the amazing thing with Leia, Princess of Alderaan. First off, I mean, obviously the titular character is amazing. Like that's a great character to get to work with. And Claudia Gray's already done it with Bloodlines, which took place 6 years before The Force Awakens, another book that she wrote, which could also have sat in the number 5 spot easy enough. It could have taken out Tarkin. Same with Tarkin was by James Luceno, but that could have unseated Tarkin. There's a lot of books that could have easily sat into number 5. Really, it is that the scenes with the Emperor that put Tarkin over the top. But anyway, we're talking about Leia, Princess of Alderaan right now. This book is just phenomenal, and what makes it so special is that it's the moment when so this is part of the road to, or journey to The Last Jedi, which Last Jedi comes out in December. Okay, so now, ever since this and Leia and Phasma, since those 2 books came out, now like all the content coming out, like there's the Canto Bright book coming out, there's that 40-year journey book coming out, there's all these books coming out. And they are, and then there's some comic series too. They are all part of this journey to The Last Jedi, which they also did with The Force Awakens, where they had a bunch of books that were supposed to be setting you up for what happens in The Force Awakens. With The Force Awakens, none of it really sets you up. With The Last Jedi, I think a lot of it is absolutely setting you up for major events that are going to happen in The Last Jedi. And I think the reason that that's possible is completely because of Rian Johnson, the director of The Last Jedi. I think that, and they said it, that he talked to Claudia Gray about what content was in Bloodlines, and that he kind of had a hand in a lot of the, novels and maybe even comic books and other things. So I think that's why there's going to be a lot of hints, that will have bearing, that you're reading about in these books, that will eventually have bearing in The Last Jedi, or maybe even Episode 9, which is nice to have that finally, because, I mean, Catalyst, I think, when Rogue One came out and they had the prequel book for it called Catalyst, I think that had a lot of bearing and allowed that movie to make a lot more sense than maybe it did straight up. Not to say it was a confusing film, but I think there was a lot more going on that you understood when you read Catalyst beforehand. Just like I think there may be a lot of things that might be very interesting, because you already have and look, spoiler alerts, folks. I mean, that's how it is. With Leia, Princess of Alderaan, you find out about Crate, which you find out is an old rebel base that that Leia kind of discovers in this. And Crate, you find out, is one of the main planets. In fact, if you watch the trailer for The Last Jedi, I think it's the scene where when like the music really hits hard, about a minute in, and you see those like land speeder things with the red dust behind them. That's Crate. So you visit Crate in this, which is a direct planet that's going to take, that has major bearing in The Last Jedi. You also have, you have what's her name? Amilyn Holdo, who is being played by Laura Dern, who's a Vice Admiral of the Resistance in The Last Jedi. But you get to experience Amilyn Holdo as Princess Leia's best friend, or, close friend, whatever, in this, and you get to experience the character and you get some history around that. But you get history of their relationship. Again, very direct bearing upon The Last Jedi, unless Laura Dern's character, unless Amilyn Holdo isn't going to be a big deal in The Last Jedi. I mean, maybe, certainly Star Wars has pulled that hat trick before. So, I mean, those are nice touches that will hopefully have some kind of, will allow for some grander meaning in what you end up seeing in December in The Last Jedi. I'm certainly looking forward to that. But even that wasn't really the strength of this book. And the next thing I'm about to talk about isn't the strength of the book either. We're going to get into what that is, at the end of the review for this, and then we're going to move on to reviewing other things. So one of my favorite things about this, even though I feel like they sort of fucked it up from what originally was probably George Lucas's vision, but you got to spend a lot of time on Alderaan, and you got to finally experience what Alderaanian culture's like, what the royal family's like, that Leia's a part of. You got to experience, and this is something I was hoping would be in Rogue One, but fine, it's not in Rogue One. I'd still love to see the visuals. I'm sure there's going to be a show where they're going to show what Alderaan's like at some point anyway. But all right, whatever. I'm getting my Alderaanian fix in Leia, Princess of Alderaan. And what I think they changed, it seemed like, in before Disney took over Star Wars, Alderaan was generally accepted as being this pacifist world. No guns, no military, like none of that shit. They got rid of their military. In fact, there's whole quotes from Bale about this sort of thing. But then, what you're finding out in this book is, oh no, people go through various training. They have blasters with them and everything. And so it's not so much the pacifist world, even though throughout the book this book very much has to do with Leia's introduction to the fact that there is a rebellion. Okay. And against the Empire. She's a senator, blah, blah, blah. But she's finding out, oh shit, there's a rebellion. And of course she finds out, oh shit, my parents are the leaders of it. That being, Bail Organa and his wife. And you get to experience both of those characters very much in depth, which is really cool. But anyway, so she is wrestling constantly as she discovers these things, finds out the truths about the rebellion and the Empire, etc. You start to, she does wrestle in her mind, like, wait a minute, is violence the way to go about this? Because she experiences at varying points that the rebellion is absolutely a violent organization. You could say it's defensive, but it's violent. And she wrestles with that a bit. And of course, she finally comes to terms with it and says, okay, well, no, I'm going to be a part of the rebellion. I don't think that's a spoiler alert because, for fuck's sake, you've seen the rest of the Star Wars movies. Otherwise, I don't know why you're listening to this. But anyway, you get a lot of, one of the nice things in this is that the interactions between Bail Organa and finally getting to really experience Leia's adopted mother was really great too. But you get the interactions between Bail and Leia, and you find you get good hints at why in Rogue One. In fact, it almost directly addresses it, like it almost bashes you over the head with it. Why Bail says that he would in Rogue One, in the movie Rogue One, why he says that I would trust her with my life. And you find out exactly why in this book. Where does that trust come from? Where does all that come together? And that's one of the nicer points about this book is that everything really kind of starts tying into Rogue One. And this is something I said when I reviewed Rogue One when it came out last year. I said, we're going to find out, I think, in the next 5 years that Rogue One might be the most important movie in Star Wars. Because everything that's happening in it is going to have a lot more emotional resonance, and it's going to have a lot more meaning as you consume the rest of the media and more movies come out and all that. Eventually they're going to do some kind of show or movie about Jeddah, like ancient Jeddah. And so then when you watch Rogue One again and you see Jeddah get destroyed, you're like, oh shit, that sucks. wow, all that history, all those people are gone, or all those artifacts are gone or something like that. So this book is also doing the same thing where it's pointing at Rogue One again, and everything's kind of saying, look, Rogue One's the big deal, like this is the major movie. So Rogue One, the movie, I think can become a greater film over time, regardless. And I don't mean in the sense that they could finally release the original cut that Gareth Edwards was doing. I mean that, like, just for what it is, it can become a far more meaningful film over time. So the other cool things in this, and that is that also explains a lot of what's happening in Rogue One. But there's some very nice nods to the prequels in this book, particularly in the introduction of Moff Panaka. Okay, that being, remember Captain Panaka from Episode 1? Awesome. So cool to see that character again. Now, last year, there was a reference book, a Star Wars reference book that came out called Complete Locations. And this book, Complete Locations, had this one little nugget of information that was particularly interesting. So the book Complete Locations is like it's sort of like those incredible cross-sections books where it's giving you a breakdown of, things on various planets, and it's from the entire saga. Like there's stuff on Jakku, there's stuff on Hoth, there's stuff all over the place. Towards the end, the main foldouts in the book are and cross-sections in the book are of the Death Star 2, of course, from Return of the Jedi. And there you get a preview, or you kind of see a cutaway of what the Emperor's throne room, that, of course, the classic battle between Luke and Vader happens in Return of the Jedi, what that really looks like, and like what his sleeping chambers and everything looks like on the Death Star 2. And in that, there's one little section, like you see this little statue sort of in this luxury room for the Emperor on the Death Star 2. And it says that this statue, and it's just this little thing, I mean, you've got to read every little line. And it says right there, it says this is a gift from the Emperor's loyal friend, Moff Panaka. It's like, whoa. I remember first reading that, and I was just like, holy shit, like Panaka's still doing the business? And yeah, in Leia, Princess of Alderaan, in this book, you find out that Panaka is still a very big deal, on Naboo and within the Galactic Senate, as it were, in the Galactic Empire itself, and is a friend and confidant to Emperor Palpatine. And in fact, this is the moment this is the scene, and it's only like one chapter, okay, where Leia goes to Naboo. And that's an interesting thing in itself, of course, because she doesn't know her own ancestry, but she feels like a closeness to the planet and all this, even though they end up like on a mining moon for it. But regardless, she meets Panaka, and Panaka recognizes her. And this is the scene everybody's been talking about with this book, and it's great. Like, it is especially if you still have some passion left for the prequels, it's an amazing scene. Panaka recognizes that, oh shit, this is the daughter of Padme Amidala. And, he can just see it in her face and everything. And he asks her various questions. Thing is, so I guess the Emperor has some sentimentality, because in this book, not moments later, Panaka gets killed off. By one of Saw's groups, Saw Gerrera's rebel groups, which of course are called the Partisans. They blow up Panaka's ship as an act of terrorism, quote unquote. And so Panaka is going to go tell the Emperor, oh shit, Padme had a daughter, but he dies before he can tell. Before he can tell the Emperor. But I guess the Emperor must have held on to a statue that Panaka gave him all the way into making it so important that it sits inside of the Death Star 2. Very interesting. I don't know how they thought that out, but I thought that was awesome. And like just to get that fucking respect again for once for the prequels, particularly for Episode 1, because Panaka was only in Episode 1. I thought was awesome. I was really, really happy with that. So that definitely caused this book to shine quite a bit. But in that action of Panaka dying, first off is that, like, Mon Mothma, who is also awesome in this book, she just delivers right and left in this. I mean, the book could almost have been titled her name instead of Leia, but Leia does the deed. Anyway, Mon Mothma makes it very clear, or maybe it wasn't Mon Mothma, but Maybe it was Leia's mother. Anyway, they were hopeful that they could one day reach Panaka and Panaka could be an ally, which that was nice, to pay respect again to the character. But also, this is one of those acts that, so some of the rebellion really wanted to work with Panaka, but no, Saw's like, okay, patricians take him, or partisans take him out. This creates that rift that being described in Rogue One, right? Where Saw Gerrera is a fanatic. He's nuts. And so we don't really deal with him anymore. He's off doing his own little rebellion, blah, blah, blah. So you get more of that, which you kind of got hints of in Rebel Rising, but this just adds on to that. Again, Rogue One becomes a much more meaningful movie after reading this book. Tarkin is in this quite a bit. Another nice touch, and Tarkin is written to a T. Another one of those great characters where when he hits the stage, because we knew how badass he was because he was in charge of the Death Star in A New Hope, right? But we never got enough of him. And so to get more of him in, of course, the book Tarkin, which is, like I said, his backstory is phenomenal in that. And also in Lost Stars, Claudia Gray has already been doing great writing Tarkin because he was in Lost Stars, and he has that classic line. It's like, sometimes you need the lure instead of the lash. But he's just as great in Leia, Princess of Alderaan. A couple scenes with him, and it just delivers, and it's exactly what you expect from Tarkin, and it's really cool, and it just adds on more layers to that character, to where both Rogue One and A New Hope now also have a lot more meaning to it. But let's talk about, so you've got all that, and there's no need to really get into like what the main storyline is and all that. You can experience a lot of that, but those are kind of the nice hints that exist within the novel. But now, as far as what makes this novel so great, well, there's two things going on here. Okay, like I said, there is the tie-ins to Rogue One. So my first statement you might not agree with. My second statement I can't imagine why you'd have any problem with, and if you actually read the books, I think you'd get it. Okay, my first statement is that I think Disney might know what I know, and that is that A New Hope, maybe, eventually it's going to happen where, like, up and coming generations, where A New Hope does not. I mean, look, when I grew up in the 80s and 90s, A New Hope still looked fucking amazing. And I think, and to this day, I still think George Lucas was absolutely right in making changes and updating effects and CGI and adding in CGI and all that into that film. And if you only saw it back in 97 and you never watched like the Blu-ray editions of A New Hope, understand the special editions didn't stop when they were released in 97. George Lucas kept adding into them all the way until like 2005. Or something like, or maybe it was like 2008 or 9. Whenever he released the Blu-ray editions of it is pretty much the last time that he put a finishing touch on the original trilogy. I agree with him doing that, particularly with A New Hope, because otherwise I really think that up and coming generations will look at A New Hope, and your kid may be different, okay? But I think a lot of kids are not this way. They are the way I'm about to describe, where they think that movie looks old and ridiculous. And I actually think A New Hope is not that great of a movie. Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi are two of the greatest things ever made by humankind. A New Hope, I mean, I get it. I understand how big. Believe me, I totally fucking understand how big a deal it was in the 70s. I know we wouldn't have Empire and Return if it wasn't for A New Hope. I know, but it's kind of a rough film, and it's still, to this day, it's at the bottom of my list of Star Wars films, and I really can't see it ever getting any higher, because everything is just like, I mean, it would have to be such a terrible Star Wars movie. It'd have to be like holiday special level shit to where I would consider A New Hope not the least best Star Wars film. But let's be clear here. The least best Star Wars film is still the greatest film compared to any other film, outside of Star Wars, right? I mean, more or less, in my opinion. So I'm insulting it, but at the same time, I'm not. I still recognize its overall greatness. But in comparison to the rest of Star Wars, it doesn't hold up. And I think they know. I think Disney might know that that's going to be true 10 years from now, especially, if not already, where you have an entire generation of people that grew up with episode 1, 2, and 3 and consider those Star Wars much more than 4, 5, and 6. And they love episodes 1, 2, and 3, and good for them. Okay, so I think Disney kind of knows that, and I think they have a couple marketing strategies going right now. One of them is to put as much content around A New Hope, okay, to make A New Hope, to give A New Hope a lot more meaning, a lot more background, blah, blah, blah. Look, I know, us OG Star Wars fans, we don't need that. I know. All right. You don't have to tell me, but I think everybody else does. I think the up and coming generations, I think the generation right now kind of needs that. And just about everybody, after watching Rogue One, either in theaters or when they got it on home video, the first thing they did is they put on A New Hope right after. It got everybody to rewatch that film, as to where I don't think most people would. They would watch 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. There's a very skewed, because people generally talk to their own age groups, there's a very skewed notion, I think, where a lot of older Star Wars fans think that, no, everybody thinks the prequels suck and that the original trilogy is everything. No, I hate to tell you, probably the bulk of Star Wars fans actually think the exact opposite. And I'm not saying the older Star Wars fans. I'm saying the young ones. Okay, the ones that are coming up, the ones that Disney's trying to get, the one that Disney is trying to build a foundation on. Okay, they see the prequels as fuck yeah. They see the Clone Wars as fuck yeah. They see Rebels as fuck yeah. Like, this is awesome, and they still like 5 and 6. But I think a lot of them, they don't so much care for 4. And I've had conversations, so I'm not just pulling the shit out of my ass. But anyway, so that's one thing. And this Princess Leia, Princess of Alderaan book adds more, gives more meaning to Rogue One and to, by default, then A New Hope. Also, maybe in the background, Disney is thinking, well, if we make a new, if we appeal to A New Hope, then we actually appeal to the OG crowd because they all loved A New Hope or something. But I don't really think that that's the mindset that's going on there. But maybe. Anyway, so the other thing, and the thing that really makes this book very special, is the realization, at least for me, and actually I don't think it's just me, but it's the realization that Claudia Gray herself, the author, is creating her own mini Star Wars universe. In that with Lost Stars, with Bloodlines, with Leia, Princess of Alderaan, where like a lot of things that happen in Lost Stars, right down to the Imperial Ballroom scene from Lost Stars, you get it from Leia's perspective in Leia, Princess of Alderaan. Like there's tons of this. There's tons of mentions of shit that happens in Claudia's other books. And I think that is so cool that she's able to pull that off, where there is now she wrote, Lost Stars is such a great book because it gives you background to everything that's happening in the original trilogy and kind of the in-between years between, episode 3 and 4. And so that's great. But then to have the universe kind of come full circle, where events surrounding the movies more, or where novels are now starting to reference Lost Stars in return. That's what I mean to say. I think that's really exciting. And I think she has her own little mini universe with her own little characters and whatever else that she can kind of, interact with and play with. Kind of just like I was talking about with Christy Golden, where she started creating some of her own characters like Lassa Rame and some others. I think that this is something, because most books just really don't deliver on the scale, in my opinion. They don't deliver on the scale that Leia, Princess of Alderaan does, or Claudia Gray's other books, or Timothy Zahn, or even Christy Golden. I don't. I think there's a real problem where, in fact, a patron and good friend, he said something to he made the analogy that it's almost like Lucasfilm hired these authors and then said, okay, you get to play in the playground, but we're going to take away the jungle gym, we're going to take away the swings, we're going to take away everything that really has any reason for you to even be in the playground. And so what I think needs to happen, I get it perhaps why they're doing that, because they don't want to reveal their hand as far as what's going to happen with Star Wars, and probably because they are really making tectonic shifts in our understanding of, say, the Force and the Star Wars universe and all this. You've even heard, Mark Hamill complain about some of the directions that these things go, even though he sort of retracts it after the fact. But I think there's such dramatic shifts happening as far as that goes that they sort of can't. Now, I'm not excusing Lucasfilm from this. I think it's terrible and annoying that they want to do things this way. I also think that's why they have books that are a bunch of origin stories and that play it close to the chest close to the vest with the movies that they're releasing, because it's the only thing they know that they can sell anything that they slap the word Star Wars on right now. Okay, this is that second part of their marketing plan, is that they know that they can sell anything that says Star Wars. That won't always be true. This sheen of new Star Wars films, for the super fans, it's never going to go away. Just like it never went away when there was no Star Wars in the later 80s, early 90s. Okay, but for the everyday person, yeah, this is going to get, I think, old for some people at times. So they're trying to make as much money as they can right now by slapping the term Star Wars on anything. And so they're doing a lot of Star Wars origin novels, but they're origin novels that generally at the end of the day have like no bearing on the universe at large or what happens in the movies or something like this, except for some rare examples like perhaps, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, or like Bloodlines. Now Bloodlines makes, it suddenly brings a lot of clarity to things that are happening in The Force Awakens, right? So what I think really needs to happen, because I don't know how much longer they're going to hold this kind of attitude where, okay, we got to keep everybody quiet. We can't let the authors play on the swings or with the jungle gym or anything. We got to leave that to the movies. I think in their best interest, they should just create a complete, like all new characters that are not in any of the movies and just make it really great Star Wars and just let it rip and have it be in some part of the, I don't know, well, they got to be careful what they do in the unknown regions because obviously they have plans for that when you read Thrawn or the Aftermath trilogy. But just create all new characters, some new world, it's a big galaxy, and just let them go nuts and just make great Star Wars with all new characters and maybe sprinkle in a cameo here and there from the big boys. That's what I would do. I think that's what because what's happening is, aside from examples like Leia, Princess of Alderaan, like, kind of the top 5 that I mentioned, and maybe other stuff by the authors in that cadre, aside from that, my statement, and I also had another great guy and patron say this, that he thinks I have an old saying that I've had for decades, okay, about Star Trek and Star Wars, and that is Star Wars makes great comic books, but it makes shitty novels because it's such a visual medium. As to where Star Trek can make great comics too, but Star Trek actually is I've always made the argument that it's in many ways the opposite, where Star Trek makes great novels, but not so great comic books so much. And Star Trek makes great novels because it's such a cerebral show. It's such a thinking show. It doesn't so much rely upon visuals, because honestly, Star Trek at one point existed at a time when special effects were pretty rough stuff. That's never been true for Star Wars. The visual flair has always been part and parcel with Star Wars. So comics work for Star Wars. Novels, not so much. And the person finally said, after reading so many of the new books that have come out with the new canon, said, yeah, actually, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Like it's tough going. It's tough slogging through some of these Star Wars books because Star Wars just doesn't work in book form. But also at the same time, I think that some of these books are genuinely like not the best. Princess Leia of Alderaan is one of the best ever. It's so solid. It's so cool getting to experience Leia more, getting to have those connections to The Last Jedi that are genuinely there, having all the connections to Rogue One and A New Hope. That's fantastic. Having the connections to Episode 1, phenomenal. All of that was, Tarkin in it, all of that was just top notch. Really, really cool. Now, another book that came out, which is Phasma, which came out the same day as Princess Leia of Alderaan. Almost all the exact opposite is true, meaning that this is a book that, it has some degree of a varying timeline. Like at the end of it, it's 9 years previous. At other points, it's 15 years previous to The Force Awakens. It's kind of all over the map because it's it's a resistance agent telling a story to a First Order agent, First Order, a person very important called Cardinal in the First Order, the secret history of Captain Phasma, where she comes from. She comes from this planet called Parnassus and all this, which that's an interesting name, but I don't think I'll get into that right now. And you do get introduced. There's some relevance with like the character of Cardinal where he wears this red armor, which will have some bearing in The Last Jedi. I don't even need really to get into the plot because, I'll get into little bits of it. But bottom line with the book Phasma, okay, not the most interesting read in the world unless you're just crazy about this character of Phasma, which to some degree I personally, I really can respect. because I was one of those guys in the 90s who absolutely loved Boba Fett. I still do. And totally because of the mystery and because he just looks so goddamn cool. And there's nothing wrong with that. Cool factor in so many ways is everything. Style over substance? Fuck yes, that works. Have you ever listened to Kiss? It's my favorite band of all time. I mean, they have plenty of substance too. They're great musicians, great artists, but you get my point. I don't have a problem with that. Like if people are really into Phasma just because of the enigma and because of, just because the character looks cool, that is completely valid, especially in Star Wars, where it's, like we just said, it's such a visual medium. Like visuals are everything when it comes to Star Wars. So, but the Phasma novel, yeah, it tells you her supposed history. It kind of you sort of get, at the end of it, it confirms the story being told by the resistance agent. But, she comes from this world where it's a very hard life. Brendel Hux, not Armitage Hux, who is the guy in The Force Awakens, but his father, General Brendel Hux, crash lands on her planet, meets her, and, they all have to work together to get off of there, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's the basic plot of it, and it's really that basic of a plot. Maybe the interesting things in it are some of the details that happen in between. I'll say this quick. Just like Bloodlines and Lost Stars, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, so here's another theory that I have, or not theory. Here's what I think is true of a lot of new canon Star Wars books. The only important things that happen in the book happen at the very end of the book. This is true with Phasma. With Claudia Gray's books, none of that is true. Like the entire book is important, but every other book, Ahsoka, go down the list of the books. The last chapter is where anything that has any real weight or bearing or that matters to the universe is where it happens. Phasma, I think very much it's similar, the same thing. In fact, like the last chapter is her making her armor, which of course we know according to the Force Awakens visual dictionary is actually made out of a Naboo ship that belonged to Emperor Palpatine. That's why it's chrome. So, and really her armor was just like, it was an art design for Kylo Ren that they thought it was too awesome. They didn't want to waste it. And so they gave it to her. But this whole book is really setting her up. It's setting up her attitude. And I think it's being retroactive. They didn't expect people to respond, I think, so much to Phasma, just like maybe Lucas never expected Boba Fett to be a character that people responded to and were so interested in before. They're kind of retroactively setting up, I think they're setting up Phasma for a big play, as in big play meaning she could join the resistance, because this whole book is making her out to be this character that doesn't care about the First Order, doesn't care about anything except herself. Like there's a scene or a description of her past where she permanently breaks her brother's leg and kills her parents, all so that she can survive. And they're just trying to show how ruthless she is, and that, she's only working for the First Order because it suits her. Like it suits her goals for right now, but she'll turn, any second and go and work for someone else. And I think part of this is also to retroactively explain, wait a minute, why did Phasma, with just the slightest threat to her life, why did she turn over the First Order just like that? Well, now with the book Phasma, you kind of get some understanding of that, is that she doesn't care about the First Order. She just cares about herself surviving. Her will to survive is numero uno. And the biggest thing for her. So yeah, she'll blow up the entire Starkiller base as long as she doesn't get a blaster bolt to the head. Okay, and so I think they're trying to kind of explain that, which was really just a flub. I think that was a very weak flub on J.J. Abrams' part, which is another reason why I think some people are mad that he's actually going to be doing episode 9. Regardless, so you get to understand that about Phasma, that she's this rogue character, kind of like Boba Fett was. There are a lot of descriptions of how the First Order works and First Order operations. One of the interesting things that both the Phasma book and there's a Phasma comic book going right now, which is only two issues deep right now. I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. In both of those, they highlight that a lot of your First Order stormtroopers and pilots may be women. That's like that comes right out. They have short cropped hair, the whole thing. It actually sounds kind of sexy. But that was very interesting. So you get a lot of that stuff. You find out what effectively happened to Armitage Hux's dad and why Armitage is so young but such a big deal in the First Order already. That makes some sense as compared to things that happened in the last book of the Aftermath trilogy, of course, by Chuck Wendig. And yeah, again, the book, I mean, you could just kind of be told that. Like, I really think a paragraph could have explained the fact that Phasma is only out for herself. She doesn't really care about the First Order. Move on. That could have been done in like a prequel book to The Last Jedi or something. But instead, you have this entire book that is really just an exposition explaining how she's so ruthless and how she's so, self-serving, blah, blah, blah. Not that I have a problem with that, but she's an egoist. Anyway, so she, in like not the very last chapter, but the chapter previous to the last chapter or so, there's a point where, well, spoiler alert, she gets in a fight with Cardinal, and she does take off her helmet, which is kind of a big deal because they keep hinting at the fact when they're not talking about Phasma's history, but for as long as, well, her culture that she comes from on Parnassus has this thing about masks where when they get to a certain age, they wear masks and they never take them off. So it's not like her wearing a helmet all the time is that out of a thing, but you do get somewhat of a reveal. Cardinal sees what she looks like with her mask off or with her helmet off. Again, this is playing more into that Boba Fett coolness factor, right? Because everybody always wondered throughout the 90s and so on, what did Boba Fett look like underneath that fucking helmet? They're really, really playing and alluding, alluding to that same mythos with the Phasma character, and that's fine. I don't mind that's a thing. I mean, what the hell? JJ copied a bunch of other shit too. So he does see what she looks like, and it is made very clear that she is like hauntingly beautiful. Like she's just that gorgeous. And of course, Gwendolyn Christie, right? The actress who is in Game of Thrones. I mean, she is a gorgeous, just a giant gorgeous woman. And so that's nice. I think that's kind of cool that they're playing it up that, oh no, like, she's really, really hot under there and just, totally vicious, blah, blah, blah. That's okay with me. I mean, that's all there is really to say about that book though. That book otherwise is, I mean, it's not terrible, but everything that you need to know about it could have been handled very easily in like one of the visual dictionaries or in a cross sections book or something, or a characters like the character encyclopedia that I have behind me that they just released in April. You could have explained all this, just that she doesn't care about the First Order. She's only out there for herself. So it didn't need a whole novel, whatever. The comic book so far is interesting mainly because it takes place after the events of The Force Awakens, and it's really largely the only content we have where we have some kind of story that is happening outside of or that happens after The Force Awakens. And the comic book is titled Captain Phasma, where the novel's just titled Phasma. It's sort of funny, and they do a good job. Credit to Marvel, because in the first issue, they are explaining how inside of like 15 minutes, pretty much, Captain Phasma escapes Starkiller Base to be able to live on to where she can end up being in The Last Jedi. And they're sort of tongue-in-cheek about it. They know that it's crazy. They know that it's ridiculous, and they make it over the top with her in issue 1. And so I think that's fine. And then in issue 2, it turns into a manhunt situation. It looks like in issue 3, you might actually get to see her face. Or maybe issue 4, because the preview of the cover is her helmet off. So we'll see how that shapes up. I've already read both the original issues. The comic's not bad. The comic's certainly more worthy than the novel is. But yeah, I mean, they're really setting this character up. I wouldn't be surprised if somehow she does end up just joining the Resistance or something, or she becomes a bounty hunter on her own, whatever. Because it is, I get it. It's a cool character. So that's all there is to say about the Phasma book. Just, little interesting things to learn within it. You learn a lot about how the First Order works and, how like the troopers are trained. Like they talk about they're not clones, that they're programmed from birth. I mean, you learn more about that, or programmed from whenever they're kidnapped or something. You learn a lot more about that in the book. But yeah, again, really, it's just all to like keep to just hammer you with the idea that Phasma is all about herself and no one else, just totally about herself. So there you go with Phasma. And of course, like I said, the comic book's shaping up pretty good so far. And if they weren't so tongue in cheek with the first issue explaining how she escapes Starkiller Base inside of, that 15 minutes and just how much she does, I would have thought it would have been cheap, but they knew they had to be kind of ridiculous with it. And I think it works. So, all right, now let's talk a little bit about some other things. The Rogue One comic book adaptation finally completed. Now, the nice thing about the Rogue One comic book adaptation is that Gareth Edwards, in fact, wrote an afterword in issue 1 of this, and I reviewed that back a few months ago on a Star Wars update, where he said, this is the comic book adaptation has given me the opportunity to put in some deleted scenes and give things some more meaning. When you read the 6-issue Rogue One comic book adaptation, you definitely get that. You get more understanding of what's going on for Galen Erso. You get a lot more of what's going on for Bodhi Rook, the pilot. Like you get feelings for the pilot, for what's happening with him when you read this, and it's all because of these extra scenes that happen outside of it, and the stuff that you see in the movie, they sort of shortcut it so that you can get right to the things that the movie doesn't explore. So this is really cool because with the comic book adaptation for the Force Awakens, it was pretty much a panel for panel, just, it's like, why read it? Because you could just watch the movie, because there's nothing different in the comic book. The comic book doesn't add anything to the lore, to what's happening. Even reading the novel, you got a little something extra. You got a little bit more in the heads of the characters, like at the end fight where you find out that Rey was tapping into the dark side a little bit for a moment. You get a lot of those hints in the novel, but the comic book adaptation of the movie did nothing. As to where this is the exact opposite. It's almost not a comic book adaptation of Rogue One. It's more like having a second screen while we're watching Rogue One, and you're seeing other events happening while you're watching Rogue One. It's a really cool idea. I like the way that they treated this. It definitely expands this movie. Like I said, Rogue One can continually become a much better film, a much richer film with more meaning as more of this kind of stuff like the Rogue One comic book comes out, or the Rogue One comic book adaptation, books like Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and so on. And a lot of these other books that take place right around that time of A New Hope, that really gives it meaning. They also, either it was end of August or in September, the Cassian and K2SO comic book came out. This was just a one-shot. And what it was is, and this will lead into a point I have to make, it just explained how Cassian met and reprogrammed K2SO. That's all that really matters. The whole comic is just about that. And this, it's really not worth reading. Like it's not even necessarily that interesting. And there's not like any real expansion of the lore. Like there was the book that had to do with Chirrut Imwe and Bells Mavis that came out. It was like a shorter book, not exactly a kid's book, but definitely for younger audiences. That at least expanded a little bit upon the Force and things on Jeddah that made it interesting. The Cassian and K2SO comic one shot, I didn't think that it was positively meaningless to me. Other than this falls into that marketing strategy. Like I said, you can slap Star Wars on anything, and if you want to maximize sales, you got to release stuff. But you can only tell origin stories, because if you tell anything more, I mean, with Rogue One, it's tough because, you can't tell any more stories with these characters. They're dead. Okay, spoiler alert. So you can only go backwards. But yeah, so they're banking on a lot of these origin stories. Now, I think it's more though. All right, and this brings up the point. It's more though than that, because what I think Lucasfilm is doing, this is a very, very Jewish thing, and I don't know whose idea it is. Okay, in Judaism, you have this concept, you have these writings called Midrash. All right, now Midrash are these little stories, the best translation of the term would be folklore, where it's little stories that try to explain little inconsistencies or give expansion and origin to a lot of little things that exist within Torah, or the Old Testament, or within the Talmud or something. Like there's the stories of Lilith, which Lilith is mentioned in the book of Isaiah. Of course, if you read the King James, it's just the night monster or something like that. Other translations say it's the night owl or whatever, however it ends up getting described. The actual word there is Lilith. Wait a minute, what the fuck is this Lilith? And so some rabbis decided to write an entire story about this fact that Adam actually had a first wife who would end up becoming a demon and, blah, blah. I mean, I'm being very basic in the description. I could go on and on about Midrash because I used to study it a lot. But it feels like that's what they're doing with Star Wars, is they're just doing a ton of Midrash. Where no, all right, we've got to explain the origins. We got to explain every little detail, everything that's there. But they're doing that, which is a great appeal to storytellers, admittedly, to expand, to a really high degree. I mean, there's a reason Midrash is so popular. It's so popular to be written, not just read, okay, is because people love to get these kind of expansions and explanations of, wait a minute, what the fuck's this? Wait, how did that happen? Gee, I wonder how these two got together, and all of this, or how the hell did C-3PO have a red arm? It all plays off like Midrash, Midrash to Torah, and Star Wars being the Torah, which fuck it might as well be. But again, Lucasfilm knows that anything they slap the name Star Wars on right now is going to sell gangbusters. And so they're really just selling everybody Midrash, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but there's a reason. Here's the problem with it. And I think Midrash is the perfect analogy, not that proof from analogy is proof, but Midrash is widely considered, shall we say, in Star Wars terms, non-canon, because that it wasn't made up by the originators. It wasn't made up by the masterminds behind the big stories, behind the big stuff. And so I think that's how this Star Wars Midrash, as it were, all these origin stories and background and and all an expansion and all this, it feels cheap compared to the big stuff, like it's like, oh wow, Adam's first wife, that story kind of, I mean, not that it's not interesting, it certainly is, but it kind of pales in comparison to the story of the wife that, oh shit, we brought sin into the world or something like that, even though Judaism sees that a little bit differently. And I don't see any of it that way. So, but you get my point. Okay. Is that a lot of the stuff just seems small, unimportant, not needed. And it doesn't really teach you anything, as to where Torah has usually a purpose. It has a story to tell you. Oftentimes Midrash has no morals, it has no moral story to tell you. It's just like, it's this purely academic exercise, it feels like a lot of times. So I think that's what's going on with Star Wars. And look, I get it. I fall prey to that myself often enough in my own universe that I'm building, in the Sovereign universe. I really do get it. So I don't necessarily mean to insult them with it, but I think that that's the idea. I think that's what they're going with. They're creating, a really expansive mythology. And that's not a stupid thing to do, in my opinion. Because again, they're thinking long game right now. Okay. It sucks. I know it sucks for me too. I'm bored with it. It's annoying. Okay. That Cassian and K2SO comic, I'm never going to get that time back. Not that it was a bad comic book. It's just why, I didn't care. You told me enough. Okay. He got reprogrammed. Got it. I didn't really need the history of the mission that brought us K2SO, regardless of how, popular a character K2SO has been. Now, so the reason that I say it's not a stupid thing to do is, look, if Disney's doing, or Lucasfilm is, which is a part of Disney now, if they're doing the right business, they need to be thinking 20 years in advance. Because if George Lucas was thinking 20, 30 years in advance when he first made Star Wars, or even The Empire Strikes Back, which he wasn't, by the way, he wasn't thinking that far ahead, he could have done a whole lot of things different, where he could have helped create a much larger universe with everything that was going on. But it was a roll of dice. But now, Disney knows it's a known quantity. Okay. So they can, it's a known quantity and it's going to make money. They know they've got a fan base. There's no debate about it. Okay. It wasn't, lightning will absolutely strike twice here. And so because of that, I think they're thinking 20, 30 years in advance, where 20, 30 years from now, people can come back to all of these stories, even the Phasma novel, all the shitty novels you can think of and everything. But suddenly all of those novels are going to be part of the, and even these shitty comics like Cassian and K2SO, but suddenly they're going to have deeper meaning. They're going to have meaning. They're going to be like, oh yeah, that's how this happened. There's going to be like, an entire very well detailed mythology in 20 years, like to the minutest detail. And that's going to be very interesting to people. And you're going to have an amazing encyclopedias and all this different stuff. They are thinking the very, very long game. So it pisses us off now, but Disney knows that they can make money right now. Like I said, just by slapping Star Wars on something. It's, can they make money with this 30 years from now? And what they're doing right now, I think, is their plan to make sure that it does make 30 years, or it does make money in 30 years, because there's such a richness to every story, and there's so much to explore. There's so much content. There's so much resale value where, like, I mean, like, you could sell the Rogue One story in just a massive, like, graphic novel collection where you have Cassian, then you have, I don't know, like Rebel Rising could be in there. I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways that they could go about this that's going to make them a ton of money. So I understand that. Like, I get where they're going. It pisses me off at times. It's fucking annoying. Again, I thought that, the Cassian K2SO comic was just stupid. In fact, that's it on that. But I did the Rogue One adaptation. I think is well worth the read. You actually get a much better send off, I think, to Saw Gerrera, where he remembers his sister towards the end, which I thought was a really nice touch. But anyway, so that's my thoughts on all those. But so kind of two major takeaways here, and then I want to talk a little bit about Forces of Destiny. Is that I think Disney is engaging in mid-rush here, and they know, because they know right now it will sell, and coming down the line it's not going to sell anymore, and they're aware of that, but they're making the buck while they can. And then you have the fact that Claudia Gray is really making an entire mini Star Wars universe that surrounds the Star Wars movies, but has so much richness and interconnective tissue that it's a really beautiful thing. I can't wait for more of her books. I mean, I really can't. And like I said, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, easily one of the greatest Star Wars books ever written. Okay, so last bit here with Forces of Destiny. Same thing, Forces of Destiny. So there's like 6 or 7 of them. And they had varying characters most of the time with their original voice actors, except for some fucking reason Natalie Portman won't come back. It's annoying as hell to me, because I don't think she has anything to be ashamed of. Whatever, people feel differently. Okay, but same deal with these little animated shorts, which a lot of people were very excited for, and I think they were a little overhyped. They're a little overhyped because what you ended up getting was not boring, and it's only it's only like 2 minutes 45 seconds or something. Each one opens up with that little phrase from Maz Kanata, and whatever. And apparently they're going to make more. They're going to make at least 2 more, and Disney's going to have like some big 30-minute special, I think, in October. I could be wrong about the date on that, where it's all going to be one big shot of Forces of Destiny, where maybe they'll make all of this make a little more sense. But what these are, they're just little moments where like the first couple episodes take place one after the other, where it's exploring what it was like literally just minutes in between when Rey finds BB-8 and Rey and BB-8 traveling on Jakku, during The Force Awakens. It covers that. And you could say, who cares? Who the hell needs to know that? You're absolutely right. Nobody fucking cares. Nobody needs to know that. It was kind of mindless. But again, it was, I think it's more of this mid-rush. It's more of what they're doing. And I think they felt that they could sell anything with Rey, but you couldn't do anything previous to The Force Awakens or post Force Awakens, because then you'd be giving away shit about Rey, which right now is this huge mystery. So, they're sort of, I think they kind of put their own handcuffs on. But some of the other ones were cool. The one with Jyn Erso was whatever. Okay, you got to see her more of a fighter, so that more solidified her. Okay, so there's a bit of mid-rush. Then you have the ones with Princess Leia. Now this one, so the 2 with Princess Leia were, well, the three, because there's one with Sabine Wren, which, whatever. It was nice to see Sabine and Leia kind of in contact, but, you know, other than getting to see Sabine, I didn't think that the episode really necessarily delivered a whole lot, though it did show you how Leia did do secret stuff for the rebels here and there. But the one on Hoth and the one on the forest moon of Endor were very interesting. And I'll say, because the one with Leia and the Ewoks, it never made sense to me. Okay, now I love the Ewoks. I think that they're great characters. You know, and they're vicious. Like they're really, like, they eat human beings. You understand? They're cooking Han Solo. But the part that never made sense was, why didn't they cook Leia? Did they just think women are superior? I mean, that's fine if that's what they think, but like, why didn't they cook Princess Leia? Instead, they like treat her like a goddess. Like, what's the deal? I mean, hey, look, if anybody deserves to be treated like a goddess, it's fucking Carrie Fisher. Okay. But, you know, why is that? And I think that this little 2.5 minutes explains why, because she saved a bunch of Ewoks, you know, from getting captured. It wasn't just like that she was nice to Wicket, like you see in Return of the Jedi, but she ends up saving a bunch of Ewoks. And so that made sense. And you even get to see where they give her the clothes, you know, that you see her wearing in Return of the Jedi when everybody goes to the Ewok village and all that. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. That was sort of cool to see. I didn't mind that. The other one, I don't think everybody would get the importance of the other one. And this is the one that takes place on Hoth, where Leia's looking for Chewbacca, and she goes to find him, and she finds him it's just some door that leads into a cave, and she finds Chewbacca being held by a wampa, you know, the big giant, you know, furry white thing that's beating up Luke in the beginning of Empire Strikes Back. And, you know, so there's this whole thing where they're taking on the wampa. She has to free Chewbacca, and they have to end up getting back into that door. And so that they get back through the door into Echo Base, and they close it off. Now, what I was hoping would happen in this is that you would see C-3PO or somebody put a yellow warning sticker on this door, because there's long been known, and you can see part of the scene. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. There is a deleted scene from The Empire Strikes Back, and it's funny as hell. Okay, and I really wish that they were going to... It was the one scene I actually wanted to see them include in the special editions that never happened. Maybe someday it will. But when the Imperials are invading Echo Base on Hoth and in The Empire Strikes Back, when C-3PO is running away, this is the deleted scene. C-3PO is running away, and stormtroopers are going after him. He sees this door with a yellow like warning sign on it. He rips the tag off the door, and then he keeps running. He doesn't go through the door. He runs away from the door. Stormtroopers come following behind, and they open the door, and then suddenly you hear the wampas. And like these stormtroopers are just freaking out, blah, blah, blah. And then Darth Vader comes walking by. The door gets closed by the other stormtroopers nearby. And Vader says something like, "Is there a problem?" And the stormtrooper just says, "Oh, no problem." Or the snowtrooper, I guess in this case, says, "Oh, no problem, sir." You know, and everybody just kind of moves on. But C-3PO, it's funny because C-3PO like just rips off this warning sticker, and it tricks the stormtroopers into getting attacked by a bunch of wampas. And I think that this Forces of Destiny little mini episode, 2 minutes, was showing that door. That legendary, that fabled door that has the warning sign on it, even though in the Forces of Destiny cartoon, it's not there. But I think that's what they were hinting at. And it would have been great if they made a Forces of Destiny where even just they showed that scene. That'd be fine. You know, you don't even have to like add it into the movie. Just do the little cartoon with it. You know, the little animation with it. And I think that'd be great. So I actually liked both of those. I thought that those were cool. But the ones with Rey, kind of meaningless. The one with Jyn Erso, I get it. You're trying to show her being more of a badass and a fighter. Okay, fine. But kind of meaningless and showing that she has a heart and all this. But those two, the one on Endor, or on the Force Moon of Endor, and the one on Hoth, both of those I think were really, really cool and actually answered some questions or made references to some ancient lore within Star Wars, the making of Star Wars, I guess I should say, particularly. So those were all right. There, like I said, there's going to be more of these. They've already said that, and they're going to be doing a special on the Disney Channel or on Disney XD, I assume, where they're going to show all of them and maybe some new ones, or maybe they're making all new ones. I don't know. I'm fine with these. You know, yeah. Do we need to know? No, but who the fuck cares? Like, well, I wouldn't tell them not to do it. Like, go ahead. You know, have a good time with that. I mean, they're only 2.5 minutes long. You know, it's not like taking away so much time from my life. So, but I do understand where people are just like, oh, these are so pointless. Why is Lucas like telling every little nitty gritty detail? Well, like I said, they're thinking very long game, and they want to have answers for all this stuff. And, that way that they can, eventually they could have, maybe even automate sort of the story group in a way to where there are so many answers to this, and that authors could, write willy nilly and all, and who knows what else they could do. Maybe it's to create, maybe Disney knows that in 30 years that they're going to have some kind of awesome virtual reality technology, and they want like as much information inputted into the Star Wars galaxy and the Star Wars story and universe, right down to origin stories of every major character that you see in the movies, to where that can have weight and bearing on what you experience in this virtual reality world. Maybe that's the big plan here. But I really don't have it's fine. I mean, if I was, all right, let's be honest. Like if I had to pay for a lot of it, that I'd be pretty annoyed. But if I was buying comic books, I buy books. I do. I buy the audiobooks. Okay. But if I were buying the comic books, I would buy the trades. I'd buy the graphic novels because there's nothing going on that can't wait for the whole series to come out. Like you don't need to know that far ahead of time, in my opinion, with what's going on. So if you do want to buy them all, just wait for the trade paperbacks, wait for the collected series, and then you don't have to buy the single one shots. They'll just be included with one of the trades. That's the way to go with that. So anyway, that's what I think what's happening with Star Wars. There's a review of some of the content that came out. We'll do another one of these for October, where I'm going to do a review of a lot of other series that have come and gone so far, as far as comic book goes, including Darth Maul, Screaming Citadel, a lot of what's happening with Dr. Aphra and some other things that we'll be covering. And there's that, Stories from a Galaxy Far, Far Away or something, where it's like 40 short stories. I already have that pre-ordered. I'll be jumping on top of that. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. So, you're going to get one of these once a month easily, because there'll at least be a novel, and there's always comics every week that I'm reading. So, countdown for Last Jedi. We're under 90 days, baby. It's going to be a great time. I will be ticketed up for that shit. So anyway, more content coming out on Patreon this week. We're going to end off September with a bang, baby. I will see you on the other side, and may the Force be with you. What the hell?